Joseph, I think we can start maybe introducing ourselves.
That sounds good to me.
Okay, very good. So welcome everybody. This is a short presentation of our new challenge. Joseph and I want to take the chance to develop contents that on the border of our interest, proposing this course on designing sustainable future. Actually, I'm an associate professor at Politecnico di Milano. Since I think it's like 15 years that I deepened the research between the topic of design and futures, trying to understanding the overlapping between the discipline of design and future studies. I teach in the undergraduate course of product design, but also in the master course of integrated product design, where I have a course of design fiction focalized on design culture. I'm a lot interested in the topic from a research perspective, but a kind of research which is a design-driven research or also a practice-based research in a certain sense. So I'm interested in bringing critical elements from the speculative dimension of design inside the design path, but also in overlapping with the anticipation studies and approach.
Thank you, Manuela. And my name is Joseph. I'm a visiting professor at the Politecnico di Milano. And in this course, I'll actually be focusing on with a hat on as a futures advisor with the Institute for the Future. I'm very excited to represent IFTF, and will share a couple of the faculty from both IFTF and Politecnico di Milano. I've spent the last 12 years teaching topics around sustainable futures, starting at Parsons Design School in New York. And I have been able to continue exploring these spaces in a research group that we'll eventually be talking about in the Politecnico di Milano called Ideals. And that's actually a topic that we will explore. How do we not only design sustainable futures, but how do we transition towards those sustainable futures? And if I may, I'm personally really excited to be working with Manuela and the Politecnico team, not only because I have 2 feet in both the world of Politecnico and the Institute for the Future, but also because this course that, as you can see here, we will be launching in the fall of 2022, is an opportunity to apply design futures to a sustainable development goal. And you'll see on a number of the slides, we have some QR codes, and that should give you the opportunity to get more information. We will share the presentation from today's webinar, but just very, very excited to bring futures and design together. Manuela, tell us a little bit more about why it's important to bring futures and design together.
Why it's important? I strongly believe that there is a natural overlapping between design and futures. Design in Italian translates with the word progetto, which means to throw ahead. So to have the ability to look forward. And more or less consciously, every designer plays with the futures, because when you design, you are working with something, you are producing something that does not already exist. So you're working anyway with the future, dependently, of course, on the time span that you're looking at. But for sure, blending futures and design means acquiring autonomous ability in generating new visions, being able to employ the research information to build different scenarios. And I think that in this kind of practice, design is particularly skilled compared to other disciplines, because usually what we do is that we are able to crystallize, to give shape to the images of future. So it's important also to be able to pass from an evocative dimension to a material one. And with material, I want to say we don't mean only product, or I mean practical or material stuff, but also all the systemic dimension that is involved in designing for something. This means that we can develop product as well as services, and the design of the system itself. So this means that through the experience that we're going to propose you will be able to have not only the ability to produce vision, but also to imagine how to transform those vision into something that you can infer, you can bring inside your system, and you can transform into something practical.
So bringing together POLI.design and the Institute for the Future is really the place where we're going to be combining futures, as you said, Manuela, the ability to imagine alternatives and actually make it real using design. And from a design perspective, Manuela, tell us a little bit about POLI.design.
POLI.design is the institute that inside the design system is meant to bring the design content outside the normal layers of the university. I mean, graduate and undergraduate courses. Actually is a top-ranked non-profit consortium founded by the Politecnico. But we have different training areas inside POLI.design. We have different innovation paths, more than 80 training projects, and something like 25 masters. And it's important to underline that also the design school actually occupies the 6th position in the World University ranking. So I think that the level of competencies that we can bring inside this project is very much important in the development of this relationship between design and futures.
And thank you for that, Manuela. And from the Institute for the Futures side, it's been a wonderful partnership to bring futures and designs together. The Institute for the Future is the world's oldest and certainly one of the leading futures organizations. The work that the Institute for the Future, or IFTF, does is to enable and increase the capacity of people, whether they're in organizations that are focused on public benefit and impact, or corporates that may be more for-profit, or educational institutions. Really, the Institute for the Future came into being because we realized that one very powerful way to help create a better world is to be able to imagine a better future, to be able to build or design organizations to be able to move towards that preferred future. And ideally, all of the work that IFTF does encourages a trigger or triggers what people need to do differently in order to make that usually 10-year timeline come a little bit closer. And I do encourage everyone to take a look at the Foresight Essentials program, which there are a number of very important courses available. And one of them is actually coming up, if I may do a quick pitch. So our design futures, and this is really the basics of design futures to make the future come alive in the present. This is going to take place on May 15th to the 19th. And although we encourage everyone who is gone through this to consider applying design futures to a sustainable development goal, it's not mandatory or required. But we do encourage everyone to have some interaction with design futures before going into the Designing Sustainable Futures program. So we can talk about that in the question and answer. But let's take a look now at the course, starting with the faculty member and the target audience of our program. Manuela?
Yes. So from the POLI.design team, I will be involved, of course, not only as a scientific coordinator of the course, but also as teaching staff. And my role would be to introduce you to the speculative design approach. But I want to say that bringing design into the future practice doesn't mean only to be speculative. We will join the speculative abilities together with the systemic view from Silvia Barbero. Actually, she teaches in Turin at the Faculty of Design there. She's involved with a lot of European projects as we are, but her main focus is systemic design. So we will try to read the reality from a systemic perspective, and then to understand how we can change those reality. How can we bring, as Joseph was saying, those reality toward the preferred futures. Then we have, and it's very important, the contribution of Anna Meroni, which is actually Vice Dean and head of the Product Service System course at the design school here in Politecnico. She's one of the main initiators of our program in teaching design for services. It's very important to understand that we can pass from a systemic view to a view where we don't talk only about products, but we understand also the connection between products and services, or services themselves, depending on which will be the topic that you will start from. And also we have the contribution of Tommaso Buganza, who is inside our teaching faculty in the engineering department. He deals with management, and he will bring us into the world of narration inside the organization.
And on the Institute for the Future side, I'm very happy and excited to be the co-director of the course with Manuela. So like Manuela, I will be in all of the classes. The final class, I will have the pleasure of focusing on leadership and the people aspects of transforming towards better futures. We will be honored with Jake Dunnigan, who is an associate professor at the California College of Art. And I will also be very pleased to be joined by Jacques Barcia, who is also one of our faculty members in the Design Futures program that I mentioned earlier. And he has a real skill for creating scenarios, artifacts of the future, and loves bringing in his journalistic background and science fiction writing background as well. So we're really excited to have a group of experts, including Manuela and myself, to really bring you, we believe, a very unique program. Manuela, so why should we learn how to design sustainable futures?
Of course, actually, it's really important that we are able to deepen our understanding of design future by applying method and tools to a systemic problem view, or also to the so-called wicked problems inside the topic of sustainable development goals that actually are our main focus. Of course, this need is also very important because of the scale of the systemic needs that we are facing. And it's also important that starting from the understanding of the systemic needs, we are able to trace the possible path toward these preferred futures. Of course, UNESCO developed this definition of the key competencies for the sustainability. And specifically here, we address one of the competencies for sustainability, which is the anticipatory and the strategic system thinking. And we will integrate this competence, that is for sure the most transversal one in our modules, also together with competencies like problem solving, normative, critical thinking, and of course, self-awareness, which from my perspective is probably the first one to be mentioned, because the first thing that we will have to do inside the course is to position ourselves in our understanding of the future, in our objectives, with a critical view, of course.
I couldn't agree with you more, Manuel, of the importance of self-awareness and putting ourselves in these wicked, complex problems. Because if we are, then ideally we will be able to find the balance between what many of us have probably been exposed to over the last few years as design thinking has become so popular, which is actually about creating products and services with futures thinking. And futures thinking, as you see on this wonderful image from a Medium post from Anna Rumiasteva. I apologize if I didn't get the pronunciation right. But what we like about this is just being very clear that divergence to convergence is important, but also when we are looking at complex systemic problems like the Sustainable Development Goals, we need to be able to also diverge and identify what are those possible future worlds. And by identifying possible future worlds, then we will be able to come back, as you said, Manuela, to ask ourselves the questions, well, what are the choices that we need to make or would like to make in order to prepare for those possible worlds? So with that in mind, what we have done is identified a target audience that we think this kind of a course can help contribute to. So for professionals who are in organizations with strategy, innovation, or some transformation responsibilities, curious if anyone on the webinar is responsible for something that's called digital transformation. That's quite popular these days because of the integration of new technology. So that's one target audience that we think can benefit from this course. We also believe that anyone, whether a professional student, it really doesn't matter, if you are passionate about helping your community or your neighborhood or anyone that you care about transition to a preferred future, then we do think that this course can be quite beneficial. And clearly, both of those are related to graduate students that probably have a deeper awareness of topics like, for example, what Manuela mentioned, speculative futures. I teach a course called Vision and Change at the graduate school at the Politecnico. And what we would like to offer this course as an opportunity to open up job opportunities, either within organizations that explicitly are looking for roles that are focused on strategic foresight or innovation acceleration. I mentioned digital transformation. That can be within organizations or, again, anyone that is passionate about making an impact on these systemic challenges. Okay. So we've been talking a lot about sustainability and specifically the Sustainable Development Goals. And what we are proposing is that we have a set of SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, that have more of an industry focus. And then the next set is more of a people and community focus. And what we are anticipating asking all participants is to choose an SDG. This will help us group the cohort into small teams around sustainable development goals. And you can see here that we've identified 4 goals, either related to healthcare and life sciences, manufacturing, transportation, consumer goods, or public sector and NGOs. And we've been a little bit creative in identifying an industry for these goals. But again, we do want, as I just said, to be able to be clear about what will be the benefit, particularly a career opportunity for professionals that may be focused in one or more of these industries. And also very much part of the SDG model are around communities, people, and leaders. So you'll see here, again, we're starting to propose that participants would identify a SDG that is related to education or inclusivity and well-being, or related to a more equitable enterprise. And when we read Goal 8, we're looking at alternatives to explicit or extreme profit-driven capitalism. I'll leave it at that. It's a topic that we're all trying to understand, and that's why we think equitable enterprises is another interesting area for us to design a more sustainable future. Mention diversity, inclusion, belonging, and then this last one, 16, around regenerative communities. We see that also is important for creating accountable and inclusive institutions. And those institutions can be at any level. It could be a neighborhood, it could be a community, it could be a country, it could be a city. So that's also something that will work together with to provide that framework. But it is important from a pedagogy and to actually implement our objective to apply design futures to a sustainable development goal. So if that's the frame, I'd like to turn it back over to Manuela to tell us a little bit more about the content of the 8 classes.
Yes, our idea is that in exploring sustainable development goals, participants will learn the tools and methodology to understand where specifically mega trends like social changes, economics, and diversity and climate change are going. And starting from that, they will develop their adaptability for any future. By seeking those more sustainable future, the participants are like pushed to expand their capacity for design thinking and learning about latest insight about the complex system and so far and so forth. But how we have organized these content into classes? We have divided them in 8 didactic modules. The first one is on designing sustainable future, introduction to design future, where we will understand the power of embodiment to envision a climate positive future. We will try to understand applied design futures through a group project where each participant will have a specific role through these through the sharing of the SDG, as Joseph was explaining. And we will try to focus on anticipatory competencies, or better, the ability to understand and evaluate multiple futures. That can be, as you might know, possible, probable, desirable. And starting from these, you will create your own vision of the future. The class 2 will be focused on maintaining a design approach, and in particular, it will be focused on the introduction of speculative design. So this introduction to design future will inform on how to integrate design to shape the levers needed for a preferred future. And in particular, we will introduce the critical thinking competencies to question norms, practice, opinions, and reflects on each own values. So again, it's important your personal positioning about the sustainability discourse. The class 3 will be focused on building better words, another way of talking about scenario building. So this world building within the future forecasting practice will help you in exploring the implication, the opportunities across the systemic design levers, and will help you to build a first image of this possible future world, together with a set of associated values. And probably also some characters or personas that might live in that possible world. And then we will have class 4, which is about designing system, as we said before. It's an introduction to system design as a way to generate meaningful and sustainable experiences for the future. Here, the competencies are focused on the abilities to recognize and understand the relationship between the stakeholders and the possible opportunities that the system brings itself. Class 5, I would have to say very enjoyable, will be focused on prototyping artifacts from the future. After the introduction to the speculative design as a trigger, this will be another creative and turning point where we will try, starting from artifacts, to change the perspectives and actions of others, and also to understand and relate and to be sensitive inside a certain scenario. Prototypes or prototypes will be like a tool to develop more awareness about the possible world. Class 6, cultivating movements, introduction to participatory design, will help us to connect those words and those artifacts inside a unique perspective, thanks to the perspective of the service design. We will try to understand and reflect on the norms and values across our sustainability values also. We will try to understand which can be a possible path, a possible transition toward the worlds that we have created. Class 7, engaging stakeholders, introduction to story making. Tommaso Buganza would be the teacher of this module. In this case, we will focus on the strategic competencies or the ability to create and implement innovative action also toward the story making. And last but not least, maybe Joseph, you can talk about this because it's your module.
Sure, happy to do so, Manuela. So to end our course, we actually see this as the beginning of encouraging all of the students to actually go out and make that better future a little bit closer to reality. And by having the topic of leadership at the end, we aim to bring together the key points that have happened throughout the entire course, and then also to inspire thinking and preparing for action to actually implement some of these ideas. So we're always trying to find the balance between futures and design with leadership. And as Manuela said, putting yourself, the self-awareness, it's something that we're going to be discussing from the beginning. But certainly as we go through the course, it will come to a climax at class 8 when we look at leadership, right? All right, so one more slide, and then I think both Manuel and I would like to turn it over for conversation and questions. So there's a lot of content that we're going to be covering in the 8 weeks. There's complexity, as we've said, starting with an SDG. So how are we going to create an experience that ideally will give all of our participants the opportunity to grow and develop and not only learn about designing sustainable futures, but also to prepare to lead and create those better futures in whatever corporate setting or community that you're in. So the way that we've designed the experience is to begin with an opening lecture from our lead faculty, to have enough time for conversation with that faculty member. And then we will go into those small groups, which will be gathered around a shared SDG. So if you recall the SDGs that I walked through previously, the 24 participants will all be put into these small groups looking at a specific SDG, and that will be facilitated by a faculty member. Then we'll take a 15-minute break. I am offering a neuroplastic exercise during that break, if you would like to join me and others in doing that. Then we will have sharing between two groups. So there are a lot of overlap with the SDGs, not only in relation to the focus area of the SDG, but also some of the systemic challenges. So we're going to be putting together groups, and we'll be mixing them up throughout the 8 weeks. And then we're going to have everyone come back together, where we'll be sharing insights, learnings, and already begin to think about, well, my specific Design Futures project, what have I learned that I can incorporate? And so we'll have some time for some one-on-one discussions, either with faculty members or with cohort members, other participants. And in the last 15 minutes, we'll come back together with a wrap up and next steps, getting ready for next week's class. Now, as we mentioned at the beginning, the course is going to happen in the fall of 2022. We're still finalizing the exact timeline, but registration is open. We were anticipating offering this at the end of April, but timing is making it much better for us to offer it in the fall. The course dates to be confirmed, but we are planning that it will take place on Friday at these times. So we're trying to find the right balance for a geographic spread. So it's in the afternoon in Europe, and then in the morning, East Coast. If there's anyone that has a real challenge with that, please let us know, and we can see how we can accommodate. So to wrap up, here's probably the two most important QR codes. On the left-hand side is the QR code that will send you to the detailed overview. Most of the material is what we discussed here, but there is some additional details on the POLI.design website. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see a QR code for registration directly through the Institute for the Future. So with that, Manuel, anything you'd like to add before we turn over to some Q&A?
No, I'm fine. I think it's better to wait for question and answers.
All right, sounds good. So I'm taking a look now at the chat. Okay. So Maria, thank you for responding to my questions. Because we are balancing or bridging futures and design, I think it's always nice to know what experience there is. So I see, Maria, you've got a certification in foresight, starting a course on design of personal futures. We all think it is important to have some strategic foresight experiences. And you can check out the materials that are on the Institute for the Futures website. I saw someone had an experience on Coursera when, Lou, yeah, you finished 2 future design courses on Coursera. It would be great if you could actually put the link to those Coursera courses. Those were created by my colleague, Jane McGonigal at the Institute for the Future. And I think they're wonderful. You can take them for free as well. So I think that is something that I would certainly recommend everyone to do. There's a lot of design thinking out there. I think it is good to do. Maria's done a one-day class, but there's a lot of available materials online. What else? So yeah, Lisa, if you take a look at the website, if you go to the POLI.design, you'll see that there is a reduction. We're offering a 10% discount, and the admission requirements are, as I've just described, some background or familiarity with design futures is ideal. Some background on strategic foresight is also recommended. But let's also be aware that because of the faculty members that we've been able to assemble for this course, we will be going into a lot of depth, right? So it's good to have some background. Just like when I went back to graduate school, I went back after I worked for a bit. Salvatore, outcome of the course is to create professionals that can shape existing organizations or someone to create a startup. My initial response to that very interesting question is creating a startup, yes, if that startup is looking to have some social impact. Yeah. Now, social impact can happen within an industry, and that's why we're focusing on industry. So, for example, healthcare, for example, consumer goods, all of those should have the opportunity for more sustainable products and services or more available healthcare. Okay. Roxanne, thank you for raising this question. Correct, the course will not be starting in April. Okay. And training budget, we can have an offline discussion about that, but registration is open if you need to spend a training budget before June. That's why we're leaving registration open to have, and Diana, you said you've got a similar course as well. Indeed, Diana, fall is far. However, what both IFTF and POLI.design realize that given all of what's happening now, and to be very transparent, COVID, war, we are really seeing that to have the intellectual space, we believe that it will give us a little bit more of that in the fall. Okay, Manuel, thank you for sharing that. Manuel, anything else you'd like to add about course content, the experiences?
There was a previous question that I've seen. What does it mean, autonomous ability? Harris, yes, probably the idea of stating autonomous ability is more connected to other layers of learning, I might say, but we can translate this into agency. As Joseph has explained, especially in the structure that we're giving to the course, the idea is that through some small direct experiences that we are activating for each of the module, our idea is to empower our groups to be able to act in the same way in the organization where they work or in the organization that they would like to build, to activate this agency toward a more sustainable future, and to be like the catalyzer, the activator of such kind of competencies and agency also for the others of the organization. This is also the reason for which we have introduced both the systemic view and the service design competencies, because the idea is that the participant will acquire the capacity to see the possibility of their network inside the organization, and so to involve them in the process of change.
Wonderful, Manuela. Absolutely agree with everything that you said. A good idea, a good future is only as feasible as the system and engaging with the people and having that agency is, yeah, critical. Good. All right, so don't see anything else. Manuel, any final thoughts?
Plan for the future, because that's where you're going to live the rest of your life. This is a famous quote, you know.
Yes, I agree with you. And Diana had a very good question. We're not going to dive deep in futures design, foresight, or systemic design. We'll go deeper on sustainability. So from my perspective, we will be going deep enough into these topics: futures, future design, foresight, systemic design. We'll be going deep enough in order for us to do, as you just described so eloquently, Manuela, design a sustainable future. So Diana, sustainability is the design space, the problem space, yeah, that we're going to be working within. So this course is really about applying future design, foresight, systemic design, leadership, story making, all of the course content that Manuela walked through, applying it on that problem space of an SDG.
Exactly. So the sustainability is like the field of application of the methodology that are developed by design and foresight, design futures. So it's like applying this methodology, but in the field and with an eye on SDG as kind of objective that we want to reach with the design futures methodology.
Exactly. Glad. Thank you for asking the question, Diana. All right. Well, I think always happy to give a few minutes back to everyone. And Lisa has asked the question, do you include measuring impact?
We didn't mention that, and I don't think it's meant directly, but probably when we are introducing the critical dimension, the way in which you introduce the critical dimension, it's also up to each group, depending on the specific topic, because for some topic, the measurability is very important, for other less. It really depends then also on the SDG that you pick up, maybe.
And I one point to add on, one point to build on, and one point to add. Manuel, you mentioned the SDGs, and the SDGs, if anyone has had the chance to go on the website of the SDG website, which we should probably share, there is, Lisa, a very detailed list of metrics. Okay, so Manuel, you're absolutely right. Depending on the SDGs that you're in, you can look at that list and the teams can make a decision about that. In addition, what we will be talking about and making sure that it's part of this is the importance of imagining a preferred future. And that's going to be the focus of our first two classes, working with Manuela and Jake, a preferred future. And from that preferred future, you will also be implicitly identifying what are the measurable impacts, what are the measurable ways to say that that is a preferred future. So I think it's a very interesting space. Diana, biodiversity, food systems, yes, we can certainly integrate that. I do want to emphasize what Manuela and I have done with the SDGs is to provide a first sketch. Okay, so let's maybe use that word. It's a first sketch of the problem space. And Diana and everyone else who joins the course will be able to bring in specifically what you're interested in for your group but also keep in mind, we will be having a personal applied design futures. That's going to be that last half hour of every class. So Diana, you're interested in biodiversity and food systems. That should be reflected in your group work, and it could be related to health. And then you'll also be able to have the opportunity to work with faculty and your peers on something that you're specifically interested in. So when Lou's got an interesting one, Manuel, I'll turn that one over to you. You see his thought?
You mean Wenlu, when she
Yes.
said, okay. I don't think that the design and foresight, at least not in this course and not in my activity, they are separate. I mean, I teach in this design culture course where I make design fictions, but the design fiction are not per se. They are not just to produce a future product. They are our best instrument to build high-level conversations. So as a true foresight, we are meant to build transformation, to make change. The idea to activate a cooperation between design and foresight is to empower foresight with the materiality of design from one side, and from the other to empower design to with the capacity of looking ahead and of understanding the power of change through making, according to me. So to me, they're not separate. They can work mutually together.
Yeah, and I think what Lou is saying, that's what you're describing, Manuel, is that interaction
Exactly.
between the two, and it's the dialogue between the two and learning from each other. And we will definitely be putting all of those approaches together and really work in a way that will be very much suitable for the interaction between them. Great. So I'll just close by saying that I hope you see how excited Manuela and I are, the Institute for the Future and POLI.design, very excited to be collaborating on this. We do think this is a wonderful opportunity to help everyone learn, to make an impact, to accelerate your purpose. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to send us a note on LinkedIn. You should have our email addresses. We do also want to get feedback if there's any tweaking that we need to make. So for example, Diana, you talked about biodiversity. That's the kind of feedback that right now we're happy to integrate. So with that, I'd like to say thank you so much for joining, and look forward to seeing you in the fall. Everyone have a healthy and safe rest of the evening. And again, I want to thank also the POLI.design team, Paola, and the IFTF team, Cindy, as well. Thank you so much for making this happen.
Thank you everybody, both the team and all the participants. Thank you for being here.
Yeah. Bye everyone.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye, Joseph.
Bye bye. Bye, Manuel.
Bye everyone.